Well, welcome to the Sacramento Model Railroad Historical Society. We're back here in our tool room working on certifying equipment. I'm Dave McGath, president of the organization. Ron Fritz is vice president. To my left here, Jim Smyrax, one of our newer members here. We're going through our locomotive and we're checking things like wheel gauge, we'll be checking coupler height, and all these steps are required before we put equipment on the rails to make sure that it will run properly and that it won't trip up and perhaps damage some of our very nice track work that we have out here. So it's a multi-step process. Ron's been checking the gauge on the wheels. On regular rolling stock, not motive power, we'll actually check for rolling on a ramp so that it'll roll downhill. If the car doesn't roll downhill, that's usually a bad sign. Something needs to be fixed. We check for wheel resistance on other things other than locomotives. We check for a 10,000 ohm resistance across the wheel sets so that we can drive our detection system out on the tracks. These are kind of the high points of what we're doing for equipment quality.
On this particular engine, all of the wheel, the gauge reads well on each wheel set on the engine. So the only really on an engine, all we do is check coupler height and the gauge of the wheels. This all checks out okay. One of the other things requires the members all have to put their mark or name on the engine, which you still have to do. An orange and a white stripe, just an orange and a white spot. Yeah. Or you pick a couple colors. Oh. Like Ken Martin uses two different colors, and those two colors are Ken's colors. I see. And all you have to do is put a dot and a dot or something.
You know what works really good? Print labels. You have a printer. The computer, right?
Okay.
And you have the self-sticking labels like address labels, or even just plain sheet of paper.
Yes.
Reduce the font size to as small as you can go, to a 6. Just your last name in your case will work.
Okay.
And cut it out with a knife. Yeah. And use clear nail polish to bond it to the bottom of the tender or the frame of the car or whatever. Okay. Yeah. That's what I do. I started doing that.
I do the same thing. I print as small as I can, and like Dave said, I print it on a label which has a sticky back. Yeah. And then you just cut it out, and you stick it on there. And, good. So that is a good way to do it. It doesn't happen very often where people get equipment confused. Sure. But it's nice to have your name on it so there is no confusion, especially when we get into open houses. Oh, yeah.
Tuesday. blocking the road.
2 hours on your setup should don't reflect the hours of other things. Yeah, Sunday's till 3.
My name is Scott Inman. I joined the Sacramento Model Railroad Club at that time in November of 1999. The next year, the club officers and membership decided to incorporate as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Since that time, we've been the Sacramento Model Railroad Historical Society. I've been a lifelong model railroader, primarily of the Southern Pacific, because I am a fan and enthusiast of that railroad, have been my whole life. But I'd like to talk for a moment briefly about the history of this organization. It was founded in 1948 as the Sacramento Model Railroad Club. And at that time, it was a small group of model railroaders who built in quarter scale, which is now known as 2-rail O-scale. This was never a club that had Lionel or 10-plate toy trains. It was always model railroading. The original location was at the State Fairgrounds on Stockton and Broadway. It met in a small loft of one of the buildings there. When the fairgrounds was being repurposed, the club moved downtown on J Street, where the Sacramento Convention Center is now. It used to be in the upstairs of a place called Beer's Bookstore. In 1981, the club relocated to this building where we are on Grand Avenue. In 1987, a group of members formed a corporation called the Sierra Central Investors, and they purchased the building. 30 years later, we now own this building, and we have put a new roof on it. We've made a lot of improvements, so the Sacramento Model Railroad Historical Society is one of the only organizations of model railroad enthusiasts on the West Coast or even in the United States that owns our own building. We're very proud of that. Me personally, I have modeled HO standard and narrow gauge. I have a large collection. I also am a collector of brass equipment. I have about 70 brass steam locomotives of the Southern Pacific. And I enjoy not only collecting but operating. Certain people who collect brass like to display it, but I'm an operator. I make improvements to the models I have, brass or plastic. I install better electronics, sound, and the modern advancements that we have today in model railroading, which are drastically different from when I joined the club 17 years ago. And during that time, we have completely rebuilt the standard gauge layout from the old one that was built in the 1980s to the ones we have today. And the biggest benefit of that improvement and upgrade was digital command control. The idea of DCC, where you run your trains and not your track, truly revolutionized the hobby, and we are proud that we were on the forefront of that technology.